Welcome to another episode of Management Muse. I'm your host, Cindi Baldi, and this is my husband and co-host, Jeffrey Tumlin.
Yellow! Welcome to the podcast where we try to inspire better work performance. Thanks for listening.
Hey everyone, exciting news. I am here to unveil, ta-da, the Uncertainty Playbook. Written by Jeffrey Tumlin and Cindi Baldi, it's 14 strategies for work success in a chaotic world. We know that most people aren't very good with uncertainty, and so we combed through the research and ran some experiments in our own work and came up with these 14 strategies that we think could be really helpful for helping you all survive uncertainty and coming out on top. If you're interested in buying the book, it's available on our websites, managementmuse.com and ondemandleadership.com. You can get 20% off if you use the promo code Playbook20. That will get you 20% off and free shipping. So stop on by, and we're wishing you some good reading. Hey everyone, thanks for joining us today on Management Muse. I'm your host, Cindi Baldi, and my co-host,
Yellow.
Jeffrey Tumlin, the man with 1,000 sounds. And today we are going to talk about, breaking down that wall. At least one good reason why you should break down that wall
Between
work and your personal life.
Yeah. I mean, obviously got to be careful, but this episode is a number of our experiences where when companies actually support people for something in their personal life.
It's over and above. It's like an extra. We always think about like employees, and the best employees do like these extra role behaviors that they don't have to do. It's not in their job description. They wouldn't be in trouble for not doing it. And as a quick example, I remember I had hired one of my friends this is my past life when I was running a motorcycle event. I'd hired one of my friends to basically come and help with everything. So, first of all, he needed a job and I hired him. And when I hired him, I was like, all he ever did was sit on the couch and watch TV. And so watch sports specifically. So I was like, am I going to have a great employee or am I going to have a terrible employee? And so I remember the first time where we were just walking around and I was kind of acclimating him to the place. And he immediately walked up and picked up some trash. And then he walked over and refastened part of the fence. And we're just walking and having a conversation and I'm showing him around and all on his own, he's going and he's just getting things straightened out. And I'm like, I'm a genius. This was a great hire. And so that's the kind of extra role behavior that we often see employees. And today we're talking about it as the extra role that organizations can do, the things that organizations can do for employees that they don't have to do. Yeah. It's not a requirement. Nobody would be surprised or upset if they didn't do it, and yet they do it.
Yeah. And so we'll pepper this episode like we always do with a ton of examples. And since this is about extraordinary events in people's private lives, we're going to make a little bit of alteration to some of this stuff. Although I don't think anybody we're giving their examples would care, but we'll first example, true story. A woman, friend we know, child born with a serious illness. And the company basically said, take as much time as you need. And this was years before there was a such thing as work from home. And they're like, you can work from home. We'll call you if we need you. Don't worry about any of your projects. We'll take them all. And they basically let her get the child stabilized. And it took a number of months And so it took, 2 or 3 months. And fast forward, by the time we meet this person, she's wildly successful, still the same company, wildly successful. And she puts on a program every year that basically is her program, but she does it for her organization, and they make a gargantuan amount of money. And because we know a few things about programs, we ask her, like, look, have you ever thought about
just doing this yourself? Like, why aren't you doing this yourself? You actually are doing it yourself. So why aren't you doing it yourself?
Right. To which she rolls out this story of like, look, I know you've met my child. I know you know what we got going on. When the child was born, they let me, and she, recounts the story. And she says, like, this is the only job I will ever have. And every dollar that I've ever made for this place is payback for them being there when I needed them. And we see this, the reason we wanted to do this story, this podcast episode, is because we collect these stories all the time. Just this week, I was in an organization, a similar type thing, except in this instance, it was sadder, and a person's child died. And this person, the company, like, said, we're here for you. This job is yours. You go do what you need to do right now. And we have everything. And they gave her the space. And I met her this week. She's 14 years at this company in a job that the average tenure is 4. And she's 14. And she's like, I don't go anywhere. She actually said she deletes offers twice a week, like probably 2 offers a week, more pay, less work somewhere else. And she won't leave. And your point is a good one about the extra role behaviors. Well studied in the literature. I don't even know, do they study the flip of it? But well studied in the literature, as Cindi pointed out, is employees doing extra for the company. But I'm not sure it's been well studied, if studied at all, of what can happen when a company does extra, like a way above and beyond for an employee. And we see it in the accumulation of just basically stickiness and loyalty to the company.
Right. And it's a motivated loyalty. It's a loyalty that is protective of the organization and striving to not just stay in their position, but like giving it their all. And so it's exactly the kind of loyalty you want. Every once in a while you get loyalty because, people don't really like change. They don't really like uncertainty. And so they just stay in sort of this job, and it's stable, and they know what to expect. Even if they don't really like it, they know what to expect. And that's not the loyalty that we're talking about.
Yeah, that's status quo bias.
Right. What we're talking about is like the employees that you want to keep, and you're going to be able to. Like, you didn't do it to make them feel like they needed to stay. You did it because like some organizations are better at this than others, but you did it because like human beings are human beings, and sometimes bad stuff happens to them and they just need a little bit of flexibility, and these organizations grant it. And then in response, you can get these employees who are just really determined to repay and reciprocate. Yeah. It's actually reciprocation.
Yeah.
Like the organization gave extra role behaviors, and in response, that person is like, I know they didn't have to do that for me. And so whatever chance I get to do right by this company, I'm going to do it. And I'm picking up stuff that I don't really I don't have to do.
Yeah. 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 It's interesting. I was talking with our buddy Nate Self. He's on season 1. doing
He's
the
also,
class on transitions.
yeah, he did transitions, and he's also the tooth fairy.
He is the tooth fairy. And his daughter is, as we're filming this, she's a week away from graduating from high school as valedictorian, and she's going to Stanford. And he has 3 other boys, 1 at the house, and then 1 in the Army, and then 1 at West Point. And the boy in the Army is coming for the graduation. Obviously, the one in the house coming. It's a huge deal. Your sister's valedictorian, right? I mean, this will never happen again. And the one at West Point is in the middle of what they call graduation week, which is a week of basically parades and stuff where you honor the seniors. And he's a sophomore. And so it's not his week. It's the week where you're like honoring the seniors. And so he put in to go to his sister's graduation because, valedictorian, giving the speech, there's family, the whole family's coming, it's family party. And West Point denied it because you're supposed to be at the graduation at West Point, even though it's not your graduation, so you can't go to your sister's graduation. And speaking as somebody who was in the Army, it's the kind of thing that tends to drive people out of the Army because this is special. It's not just high school graduation. She's getting her diploma. Okay, I get it. Whatever. She's the valedictorian. She's the number 1. She's giving the speech. And so West Point rejected it, said you can't come home for the graduation. And as he was finishing out his semester, one of his professors who knew is like, hey, are you looking forward to getting out there and seeing her? Tell her not to talk too long or whatever. And he's like, oh, I can't go. And they're like, what? And the professor's like, what are you talking about? And so he explains, I got denied. And the professor's like, oh, no, you didn't. I'll take care of this. And so as of this taping, we don't know what the answer is going to be, but the professor got back inside the process and is trying to shake loose the no and turn it into a yes. And it's like people leave organizations because when they need something, they feel like they're not listened to.
Yeah, I think.
But wait, people stay because somebody reaches in and does something unusual or extraordinary. And I know you can't do everything for everybody or everybody be asking for all kinds of goofy crap. We're not talking about this. We're talking about, so far, we've had 3 examples. 1, child born with a birth defect. 2, death of a child. And 3, a sophomore with nothing going on, not getting to go see his only sister who's a valedictorian, graduate, and give a speech at high school. And that's not a lazy employee asking for another weekend to go to Cancun. These are the moments when an organization has an opportunity, as you said at the beginning, to jump in, break that wall, so to speak, between work and home, and understand like that is a illusion that people can separate those two anyway. They bleed into each other, and do something for your people that not only does it resolve whatever they're dealing with in the moment, helps them in the moment with support, but it may give you some of these benefits, loyalty, retention, et cetera, down the road in the future.
So what I was going to say is that I think a lot of organizations are always concerned with fairness, right? And rightfully so. And in trying to be fair, you try to apply the rules across everybody at all times. And at the extreme of that, you can wind up feeling like it's just a system and there's no human element. And so it's almost like a balance. Like you do need that system and you do need the fairness, and things do need to roll out, generally speaking, evenly across people. But you also need a mechanism for people to basically have the opportunity for an exception, to to have a pathway to basically express sort of their extenuating circumstances so that way they can be granted. Like when we run into injustice issues in organizations, it's not really because somebody had months off when their child died. It's because one person, and it's usually, they either are an extraordinary employee or which I could argue that the extraordinary employee might be deserving of a little extra treatment, but it's often perceived like the person is just like a hookup, like they have a tight relationship with a boss. And so it's like the favorites are getting over and over and over again exceptions, and exceptions on things that there shouldn't be exceptions for, right? Like maybe yelling at somebody or using foul language, and they will continue to get the exceptions and other people will get in trouble for it. That isn't what we're talking about. What we're talking about is an extraordinary event in somebody's life that the organization recognizes and says, we got you. And people don't get upset over those because everybody can recognize them as an extraordinary event, and that it's not a continual thing where this person just gets favoritism after favoritism in the organization. And I think that that's where like managers have a hard time balancing that, is that they're very concerned about like not being perceived as being fair.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. I'm thinking of the trickiness of, I'm wondering how much of this, as we're talking, is you almost need a really good employee for this exception as well. Because I'm thinking about one of the places we work, an employee got cancer and they basically let her do whatever for like 10 months. And, where do you draw the line? This is a pretty big organization. Does everybody who gets cancer, is it cancer? Oh, I got skin cancer. Yeah. I mean, and I don't have cancer, but I've got irritable bowel. Can I do whatever I want? So
right.
I appreciate managers listening to this conversation and saying, this is, how am I going to pull this off?
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. And again, like to some degree, it's not shocking that somebody who's an extraordinary employee would actually potentially get benefits because their supervisor at least perceives that they're giving more than the average person. And so they're willing to give more back.
Yeah.
And so it's equitable, even if it's not equal.
Yeah.
And so I think you're probably right, because I've been kind of thinking about that as we were talking about it too, that, would we be doing this for somebody who's average?
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because go back to the example of the brother not being able to see his sister. And it happens to be at West Point, which is where I happen to go. And so like, he's too young. He's only a sophomore. He's too young to be great. But I can tell you that if that professor succeeds in getting the no converted to a yes, he will never forget that for his whole life. Mm-hmm. And are there other people right now at West Point, a population of 4,000 people, who put in an exception for their brother or sister for high school? Yeah, probably. Maybe there's 10. And they probably said no to all 10 of them. And all I'm saying is, are any of these others valedictorian? And could you make an exception? And then I would go one step further. And I would say to West Point, or any organization, but I'm just using West Point example, why wouldn't you say yes to all 10? Why not? Because these 10, they're varying degrees, but they're basically just starting their Army career. And they are going to remember the no. I remember all of the stuff that I couldn't go to. because I remember all of the weddings, like serious family events. It's a judgment and you have to be careful of fairness. But the purpose of this episode is we run into these people all the time. We're doing this episode because of the one I ran into 2 or 3 days ago. Could be making a ton of money somewhere else doing less work, but stayed with this organization because of what they did when she was facing her lowest moment. Broke the fourth wall or the third wall, whatever it's called, between work and home. Broke the wall. We know your child died. Take whatever you need. We'll take care of what you've got going on. When you're ready, come back. If we need you, we'll call you. And none of these people we're talking about abused it. They all came back within, a moderate amount of time once they got things kind of sorted out.
Hello, musers. Now it's time for commercial break.
So here's the thing. You're hiring a new CEO or you are the new CEO. Let us come out and measure how things are, the internal health of your company right now. And then based on that, we'll come back in a year and we'll give you a sense of how you're doing. And we'll help you pick 1 or 2 things that if you choose to work on might bring you the greatest possible advantage. We'll do this as a part of you meeting with your executive team. And so you'll get an acceleration of the cohesion for the key people on your staff. You'll get a couple problems that you might be able to solve easily, low-hanging fruit, but you'll also get 1 problem, maybe 2, that's a little bit trickier, but if you did solve it, it would make a big impact. That's our new CEO services. You can get it by calling us at ondemandleadership.com, ondemandleadership.com. Doesn't matter if you're about to hire one or if you've just been hired, we can help you get a sense for where to focus, how to gel those relationships quick, and how to keep on track with what you think are the important things for your company to be doing. It's tricky.
Right.
Because we see in our work the cases where this was a gigantic payoff, that it worked. I can't think of cases where helping somebody in a tough time backfired. Can you?
I think that there are a couple of lines. And so, I've seen managers try to help an employee and have a great deal of compassion for them. In fact, we have one of those going on right now where the manager could have fired the employee and chose not to because they know some of the personal stuff that's going on. And I think that that's maybe some of the ways to think through this, is it an extraordinary event and sort of a one-off? Well, okay, we should probably do what we can to be supportive. And they're going to come back and basically probably have tremendous loyalty to the organization for doing that for them in like a dark moment. And then there are a number of people who have like a more chronic issue. And the organization, many of the leaders in organizations will want to be able, when they find out, to try to help. And they may cut that person some slack or give them some time off. But I think you have to be really clear with the person that this is a chronic issue.
Yeah, sure.
And either your job needs to change to be able to meet the circumstances. So if you had a child who, like what we had talked about actually with the first example, this place before remote work even existed basically said, we'll give you all the time off to get it sorted out. And then they also just continued to be able, they basically restructured her work where she could
Yep.
Just knock it out at home.
Yeah.
And like they knew she was producing. And so like they changed around how they worked and what she did to basically allow her to be able to have the chronic issue and succeed. And then there are people who are in chronic issues where like you have to have the conversation. Look, this is a chronic issue. Either we're changing the job or I can give you some time to sort of basically restructure your life. And so the thing that I see with that example is often about like an abusive relationship. And the manager is doing their best to try to give the employee some space to be able to work that out. But like, as we all hear repeatedly, like even after you give somebody some space, oftentimes they wind up right back in it. They don't, with abuse, they don't often get out. And then you have like an employee who like you really have compassion for, but they're really not doing their job, and you can't continue to give that kind of space. And so it's either, again, like trying to have a real conversation with them about, look, if this is what's going to continue to happen, then we need to change what you're doing here. And I think you can meet that. And then everybody sees that what you're doing is fair because it's a chronic issue. It's not going to go away,
Right.
but you've like adapted the role to try to fit what they need. Or it's a conversation that like, there's really not a way for us to adapt this role. And, you know, like we're probably going to have to move on without you. And that's a very hard conversation for a manager to have because it sucks. Like,
Sure.
But sometimes like people aren't going to change. And if they're not willing to change their job, in addition to not willing to change their life, then there's going to come a point where the organization has to part ways with them. Yeah.
Yeah, we've had a number of cases where people had health issues that actually prevented them from doing the job. And I'm thinking of two off the top of my head, and the company actually kept them for one case many years and another case a small number of years. But then eventually, you know, there's nothing more that could be done. And
Right.
They were both separated from the company involuntarily, you know, because this is the only job they're ever going to get.
And the company tried.
Yeah.
Especially, I mean, like it's so hard. Like it's so jacked up that work is mixed with health. Like that the healthcare, just when you're sick and can't work and need your health insurance, that's exactly when you're likely to lose it. And so there are a lot of companies who try to extend, you know, a window of time for people to be able to keep their health insurance when they're really not working. But like, how long can you do that?
Yeah. It's probably this topic. I'm glad you used the word extraordinary at the beginning because we're probably talking about extraordinary cases, like times when the default in many of the companies we're in is to try to help an employee in a tough spot. Your distinction between an acute event and something that's chronic is important because we're talking about time, right? Is this person going to be back and able to do the job in a period of weeks, possibly low months, or is this something that's now permanent? And then do we need to look at, can this thing be completely reconfigured? Or are we looking at somebody who actually can no longer do the job and we're trying to just give them runway for a little bit of time for the humane
them to be able to adjust
of it. Yeah. But the new reality is that they actually can't do this. Yeah, it's tricky in the way that we talk about people watch, because your employees are watching what's happening, not only for the fairness in terms of, oh, you did this for this person, why aren't you doing it for this person? Or why wouldn't you do it for me? You did it for them. But also the fairness of feeling like if something like this happens, they would take care of me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll tell another Howard Prince story. So he's on my mind for whatever reason today. But he told the story about, again, back in Vietnam, and the first time a soldier died in combat of his. And so many hours later, it's getting to be late afternoon, and one of the soldiers comes up, and they're out of the danger by this point. And the soldier says, "Hey, can we do a memorial service for this person tonight?" And as soon as the soldier said it, Howard's like, "Oh yeah, of course, of course we need to do this." So he did a memorial service. Everybody came. It was like in the middle of the jungle, but it served as a reminder to them, not only honoring this person, but that if something like this happens to me, I'm going to be honored as well by the people who at this moment in time know me the best and know what this sacrifice was about. And Howard, in telling me the story, said, look, he knew after that first one that he would do this every time. And unfortunately, he'd have to do a number of these, but every time, same day, right in the jungle or where they were, boom, everybody together, memorial service, because people watch rewards, punishments.
They watch treatment.
Yeah.
And so we tend to think about fairness in terms of, did I get X for putting out so much effort? Y, right? That's
yeah, sure,
the general way that we think about
equity.
it. But there's an entire interpersonal element of fairness as well that's actually really important. And so it's, do we actually care about, does this boss actually care about the people who work there, including me? And that's what a lot of these things that we're talking about, where it's listening to the sort of the extraordinary events, or being open to the possibility of listening to the extraordinary events. It's when somebody leaves the organization, it's not that they just disappear. It's that we mark it, because we want to know that when we leave, somebody's going to care, that we just put all this time and effort into this organization, and that when we leave, we've left some sort of mark, and so I think there's that kind of fairness that often gets overlooked. But I do think that it's also I think people need to, who feel like there's a lack of justice in the situation, you have to look at whether or not you are putting the organization in a double bind. Because listening to you talk about it, you're right. On the one hand, they want fairness, and they don't want this person to get an exception if they don't think that they could get the exception. But on the other hand, if you didn't give the person an exception, you get completely hammered for being a cold-hearted leader.
Yeah.
And so if you no matter if you're looking at your boss, and no matter what action they take, you're going to basically beat them up for it. Well, you're putting them in a double bind. And you need to come off that, because basically what you're saying is, there's no way I can be happy. There's no way that you can satisfy my sense of justice.
Yeah. 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 Some of the places we work are quite large. And for a variety of reasons, the larger a place gets in general, the more rules and systems and procedures, and the more it starts to resemble.
Right. That's how you get large.
Yeah. It may have a certain bureaucratic element in it. And then it becomes, some of these exceptions can become challenging. And so the tendency is, if we're not careful, for the employees to think I'm just a number subject to the workings of the machine. But the truth is that you're actually making connections at the small unit level. And a boss, a coworker, a boss's boss that is willing to
see you as an individual.
Yeah. Find a way to give you what you need. And if they can't make the bureaucracy give an exception, try at least to work on a workaround, that's enough. That can be enough for people to feel like they were there when I needed. No, the organization didn't give me the 3 weeks off that I was asking for, but they helped me.
They gave what they could.
That's right.
And they went out of their way to give it.
Yeah. And I understand it's like what you talk about, procedural fairness. Look, I understand why we can't do this. This company's got 10,000 people, and a parent of one of the employees dies probably every week. And so it would cost upwards of however the people do the math on this, it would cost millions of dollars if everybody take all the time you need when your parent dies. And yet my manager helped me by letting me go early, by letting me use a couple
remote work days,
whatever.
Well, sure. Something they tried to make it so that way it was doable.
Yeah. They showed up to the funeral.
But I think that's where organizations fail, is like it's tends to be very organic in how you actually go about getting one of these exceptions. And it does tend to be extraordinary employees, probably just for that reason, because the extraordinary employee probably has a better relationship with their boss from being extraordinary. And so they're aware of that and have a comfort that they can just go to their boss and then their boss can work the system. But there are a number of people, and like, they're not bad employees. They might be just average employees, and they would probably actually get some help, but they have so bought into sort of the system runs this way and these are the rules that they never even have the conversation.
Oh, sure. That's a whole different podcast.
Well, yes and no. It's the organization's failure to actually have a clear mechanism for how do you go about getting an exception.
Yeah. How do you ask for what you need? Yeah. Yeah. Extraordinary employees, it's easier for them to figure out a way to get an exception. But I would also point out that employees who aren't extraordinary yet,
right,
because they're young, they just started, or they're not
they haven't found their groove.
Yeah. Helping them in a moment of need might also have.
Right. You might actually create an extraordinary employee.
Yeah, we had that. I was in the middle of basically coaching for probably 2 years, someone who just wasn't getting it at a company. And then fluke accident, she was laid up for months, and the company completely took care of her. And I mean this not as a cliche, she literally came back as a changed person, completely motivated, 100% loyal to the company, come in early, stay late, or before it was the opposite.
Yeah, it's a bit of a gamble. You don't know what you'll get. It's not everybody. And I do think that this is a challenge mentally for managers, because managers are sort of, I don't know, they're sort of in one of those jobs where it's very easy to dissatisfy people, but not all that easy to satisfy people.
Like a hygiene factor.
Yeah. And so you do end up doing an awful lot for people, and they just don't even realize how much you're going out of your way to do for them. They kind of take it for granted or are entitled to it. And so, you could make that gamble, and that person might not think it was a big deal, and, it had no impact on them at all in terms of their loyalty or their work performance. And so, you got to think about it a little bit as like a gamble.
Yeah. Yeah. And the reflex of the company was, we take care of you. I mean, that was their reflex. And they were more on the freely giving side.
Right.
And that, to your point, had actually hurt them a few times.
Right.
With people who took more than they should have because the system was too permissive.
It actually is the organizational example of give and take. So
Yeah.
Adam Grant's book, Give and Take, talks about like the advantages in the long term of being a giver, but only if you're a strategic giver.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, like your knee jerk reaction as an organization is we support our employees. And I think I can get behind that. That sounds actually pretty good. But the strategic part is I'm not going to continue to like do extraordinary measures for somebody who, comes back and leaves early and, like not going to I'm not going to let somebody be the taker.
Yeah. Yeah. The point of this podcast isn't that your company should go out and create all these rules of we give people 2 weeks off when a parent dies, and heaven forbid a child gets sick, we give them 2 months off. That's not what we're getting at.
No, in fact, that actually takes away from it.
Yeah, because once it's a rule, once it's on the books, it becomes an entitlement, and people perceive its withholding as a punishment. Mm-hmm. Even though it was a gift, they never see it as a gift once it's on the books. And so it's looking for opportunities which come around depending on the size of your company, occasionally.
And I think that that's the key. We make rules all the time for the things that happen normally.
Yeah.
We do not need rules for the extraordinary one-offs.
Yeah.
For those, we need to actually think about them and decide on that case what we're going to do.
Yeah. Yeah. We have seen the multi-year benefit that companies can get when at the lowest point in somebody's life, they were there and they helped them with support that was within the company's ability to do. The company didn't put itself in a bad financial position. The company could do it. They lent the support, but that had a very long-term payoff. Obviously, in the short term, it gave a bridge of support to the employee who needed it. But in the long term, the company benefited much more. And we've seen enough of them to where we wanted to talk about it. The pro-social example that you gave of we think about employees giving more and how that's good for a company. But I think your point is well taken. Sometimes it's good for a company to take extraordinary measures.
And I think it's just easier to feel good about being in a company that, I know people make the trade-off. They'll make the trade-off for basically having an opportunity that maybe they couldn't have somewhere else by working somewhere that doesn't treat them great. We see that a lot for status. But I would be hard pressed to think that anybody wouldn't feel so much better about their organization if they perceived that their organization was doing good by their people.
Yeah.
And it doesn't even matter if you're the one who got it. What matters is that like you can feel like you're part of a group of people who didn't have to, but just decided to be kind.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And I think about when you had cancer, and I was at the University of Texas, and they had a very generous sick leave policy. And basically I was able to attend every one of your chemo sessions, which we were living in Austin, but the chemo was in Houston. And I'm grateful, but that didn't strike me as extraordinary because everybody got it.
Right.
And
Now, what my department did for me was extraordinary.
Yeah.
They were keeping track of my schedule and leaving gifts when they knew I was on chemo, and they were wonderful and extraordinary.
Yeah. And that's another piece of it, right? We're back to and I think this will be my last point. There's probably a certain element of it, it can't be on the books or it's an entitlement and it's not going to have the impact. And to a certain extent, if it takes you by surprise, it's probably, because I don't think that the examples that we've given, I don't think the employee thought at the time they were going to get that much support and that they were in some ways stunned to get it. And then they used it for what they needed. And on the backside paid off in, years and years of faithful service. Yeah.
All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. See you next time.
Alrighty.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today on Management Muse. We are a podcast / YouTube channel that we hope is entertaining and educational. If you are on YouTube, we would appreciate you subscribing and maybe leaving a comment and a like. If you are on any of the podcasts listening to this, we would appreciate stars, following, comments, all the good stuff. We want to say thank you to Christina, Sarah, and Rebecca, and then, of course, everybody at Design at Work. And then just as a last-minute reminder, we also want to mention that we are management and communication professionals working in the field, but also have degrees that back us in science. All that being said, we are talking in generalities on this podcast. We do not actually know your particular situation. So proceed with common sense and maybe a little bit of experimentation on your end. And we hope that you make the world a more beautiful place by making work a more enjoyable place. See you next time on Management Muse.